The train station was bustling, a cacophony of voices, and the rhythmic clattering of luggage wheels against the tiled floor. I stood there, my heart sinking as I read the digital board flashing delayed, in glaring red letters. It was supposed to be a simple work trip, just a quick meeting in the city, a chance to impress my boss and maybe snag that promotion I'd been eyeing for months. But now, as I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, I could feel my plans unraveling like a poorly knitted sweater. I glanced at my watch again. The minutes dragged on, each tick echoing my growing frustration. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a message from my boss. "Hope you're on your way. Meeting starts at 3." My stomach twisted. There was no way I could make it now. With a resigned sigh, I leaned against the cool metal pole, letting the chaos of the station wash over me. That's when I saw her, standing across the platform, illuminated by the afternoon sun streaming through the glass roof. She was talking animatedly with someone, her hands gesturing wildly as if she were painting a picture with her words. I couldn't help but notice how her dark hair caught the light, framing her face perfectly. I'd seen her before. She was the principal of our local high school, known for her fierce dedication to her students and an aura that commanded respect. But there was something different about her today, something more approachable in the way she laughed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. It was captivating, and for a moment, I forgot about my train delay. As if sensing my gaze, she turned slightly and caught my eye. Our connection was instantaneous, a spark that sent an unexpected thrill through me. I quickly looked away, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. It was ridiculous. I barely knew her beyond the professional encounters at school events and parent-teacher conferences, but there was something about her that drew me in, a magnetic pull that made me want to know more. Maybe it was the way she carried herself with confidence or how she seemed genuinely engaged in whatever conversation she was having. Or perhaps it was the way she smiled, warm and inviting, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Just then, an announcement blared over the intercom. "Train service will resume shortly." Relief washed over me momentarily until reality set back in. Even if I made it onto that train soon, I would still be late for my meeting. A wave of disappointment crashed over me as I realized how much this trip meant to me. I stole another glance at her. She was now alone, looking at her phone with a slight frown creasing her brow. My heart raced again, not just from attraction but from an inexplicable urge to approach her. What would I even say? "Hi, I'm stuck here because of a train delay. Want to chat?" Before I could talk myself out of it, I took a deep breath and walked toward her. As I approached, she looked up and smiled, a smile that felt like an invitation rather than a polite acknowledgement. "Hey there," she said, tilting her head slightly as if trying to place me. "Hi, you're, Miss Carter, right?" The words tumbled out before I could think better of them. She chuckled softly, a sound that sent butterflies fluttering in my stomach. "That's right. And you're one of those parents who always shows up at every school event." I laughed nervously, feeling exposed under her gaze, but also exhilarated by this unexpected connection. Guilty as charged. We fell into easy conversation as we waited for our trains. She shared amusing anecdotes from school while I recounted my own awkward experiences as a parent navigating school politics. The tension between us shifted subtly from friendly banter to something deeper as our eyes locked more often than not. But just as I began to feel comfortable with this budding connection, another announcement interrupted us. All trains are now boarding. Panic surged through me at the thought of leaving without getting to know her better. "Wait." The words slipped out before I could stop myself. "Do you have time for coffee? Just maybe after this?" Her expression shifted from surprise to contemplation before breaking into that enchanting smile again. "I'd love that," she replied softly. As we made our way out of the station together, excitement bubbled within me, an unexpected adventure unfolding right before us amidst the chaos of delayed trains and missed meetings. Little did I know how much this chance encounter would change everything as we stepped out of the train station. The crisp air enveloped us, a refreshing contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside. I glanced at Miss Carter. "No, Amelia," I reminded myself. She had introduced herself as Amelia just moments ago. Her name felt intimate, like a secret shared between us. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything, and I could feel the excitement of possibility crackling in the air. Do you have a favorite coffee place around here? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual despite the fluttering in my stomach. Amelia looked thoughtful for a moment before her eyes lit up. There's a little cafe just a few blocks away. They have the best lattes and pastries. Lead the way, I said, falling into step beside her. The rhythm of our footsteps seemed to sync as we walked, an unspoken connection forming between us with every stride. As we approached the cafe, I couldn't help but steal glances at her. She was animated and engaging, her laughter ringing out like music as she recounted a particularly funny incident involving a student who had tried to stage a protest against cafeteria food. I found myself hanging on her every word, captivated not just by her stories, but by the passion that radiated from her. Inside the cafe, the rich aroma of coffee mingled with the sweet scent of baked goods. We ordered our drinks, an almond latte for me and a caramel macchiato for her, and settled into a cozy corner table bathed in warm light. So, what do you do when you're not keeping kids in line? I asked playfully. Taking a sip of my latte, Amelia chuckled, stirring her drink thoughtfully. Honestly, it's mostly work, but when I do have time, I love to read, especially mysteries. There's something thrilling about piecing together clues. Really? I love mysteries too. Any favorites? We dove into a spirited discussion about our favorite authors and plots, sharing recommendations and laughing over our mutual obsession with plot twists. But beneath the surface of our playful banter, there was an undercurrent of something deeper, a tension that simmered just out of reach. As we talked, I found myself leaning closer to her, drawn in by her enthusiasm and warmth. The way she spoke animatedly with her hands made me want to reach out and touch them, just to feel that electric spark that seemed to hang in the air between us. Then came a moment that shifted everything. As Amelia shared a particularly poignant story about a student who had overcome immense challenges, her expression changed. Her eyes clouded with something more profound than mere nostalgia. There was pain there, too. I guess it's hard sometimes, she admitted quietly, looking down at her drink. You want to help everyone, but you can't always save them from their circumstances. Her vulnerability struck me like lightning. It was raw and honest, revealing layers of depth I hadn't anticipated. I felt an overwhelming urge to comfort her, to bridge that emotional gap that had suddenly opened between us. I can't imagine how tough that must be, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. But it sounds like you're making a difference, even if it feels small sometimes. She met my gaze then, and for an instant, time seemed to stand still. The world around us faded away. It was just us, two souls connecting over shared struggles and unspoken dreams. Thank you, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. It helps to know someone understands. The moment lingered, charged with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. My heart raced as I realized how easy it was to become lost in those deep brown eyes, how vulnerable we both felt in that instant. But then reality crashed back in like an unwelcome wave. My mind raced with thoughts of my responsibilities, my job, my family, and the lines that were beginning to blur between friendship and something more complicated. Hey, I said quickly, trying to lighten the mood again as if to shield myself from what was unfolding between us. What's your go-to comfort read? Mine's definitely anything by Agatha Christie. Amelia laughed softly, but there was still something lingering in her expression, a flicker of awareness that mirrored my own internal conflict. I'd say anything by Tana French, she replied after a moment's hesitation. Her characters are so real. It's like you're living their lives with them. We continued talking about books and life experiences for what felt like hours until the sun began its descent behind the buildings outside. The cafe grew quieter as patrons trickled out one by one until we were left alone at our table. I should probably get going, Amelia said reluctantly, glancing at her watch. I have some grading to finish before tomorrow. Right, I replied, feeling an unexpected pang of disappointment at the thought of parting ways. Me too. We stood up together and walked toward the door side by side. Outside on the street corner where we had first met earlier that day stood my train station, Its looming presence now felt bittersweet. Maybe we could do this again sometime, I suggested hesitantly as we reached the curb. I'd like that, she said with genuine warmth in her voice. Just as we exchanged numbers, our fingers brushing against each other, I felt an electric jolt course through me again. It was both thrilling and terrifying all at once. But as we parted ways, a simple wave goodbye, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this connection would lead me down an unexpected path filled with complications and emotions I wasn't sure I was ready for yet the days that followed our chance meeting felt electrifying yet disorienting. Each time I glanced at my phone, I half expected a message from Amelia, and when it finally came, a simple text asking how my week was going, I felt a rush of excitement that I hadn't experienced in years. Hey, just checking in. How's your week? I stared at the screen for a moment, my heart racing as I crafted a response. It's been busy, but good. Just finished a project at work. How about you? Her reply came almost instantly. Just the usual chaos at school. Want to grab coffee again this weekend? Yes. I'd love that. I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly as I hit send. As Saturday approached, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of anticipation and anxiety. Would this be just another casual coffee date? Or was there something more brewing between us? I spent hours picking out my outfit, wanting to look effortlessly put together while battling the nagging voice in my head that warned me to keep things professional. After all, she was my daughter's principal. This could complicate everything. When we met at the cafe, the air was thick with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods. Amelia was already there, seated at our usual corner table with a warm smile that lit up her face as she saw me walk in. My heart fluttered at the sight of her. She wore a soft sweater that hugged her figure and jeans that accentuated her curves just right. Hey, you look great, she said, standing up to greet me with a warm embrace that sent shivers down my spine. Thanks. You too, I replied, trying to sound casual while internally reeling from the sensation of her body against mine. We settled into our seats, and the conversation flowed easily as it had before, discussing everything from books to our favorite movies. Amelia's laughter was like music to my ears, rich and infectious. It filled the space between us and made me forget about the outside world. Had you ever read anything by Sarah Waters? She asked, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I haven't. What's she like? Oh, you have to read Fingersmith. It's a brilliant twisty tale about deception and love, she said animatedly. As she spoke, I couldn't help but admire how her passion radiated from her. The way she leaned forward, her hands gesturing expressively, made me want to lean in closer too, both physically and emotionally. After finishing our coffees, we decided to take a walk through the nearby park. The sun was shining brightly, casting dappled shadows on the path as we strolled side by side. The air was crisp but warm enough to feel comfortable as we shared stories about our childhoods, her tales of mischievous schoolyard antics contrasting with my more subdued upbringing. I remember one time, Amelia began, her eyes twinkling with mischief. I convinced my friends to sneak out of our houses for a midnight adventure. We ended up getting lost in the woods for hours. I laughed, picturing her as a spirited girl full of life and rebellion. What happened? We finally found our way back just before dawn, she said, shaking her head at the memory. But I got grounded for a month. Totally worth it, though. Sounds like an adventure, I said playfully. I was more of a goody two-shoes, never snuck out or did anything risky. Really? You seem like someone who has a wild side, she teased, nudging me playfully with her shoulder. The touch sent warmth radiating through me, a simple gesture that felt intimate and charged with unspoken tension. Our laughter faded into a comfortable silence as we continued walking side by side. But beneath the surface of our growing connection lay an undercurrent of conflict within me. Each moment spent with Amelia filled me with joy, yet also stirred feelings of guilt and fear. What would people think if they knew? What if this blossoming relationship jeopardized my role as a parent? As we walked past blooming cherry blossom trees swaying gently in the breeze, I caught myself stealing glances at Amelia, her hair catching the sunlight like spun gold, her smile brightening even the cloudiest days. It felt so easy to be near her. Every shared laugh deepened my desire to explore this connection further. We stopped by a small pond where ducks paddled lazily across the surface. The tranquility of the scene enveloped us as we sat on a bench overlooking the water. The moment felt perfect until it didn't. What do you think about relationships? Amelia asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Her question caught me off guard. It felt loaded with implications I wasn't ready to unpack. Relationships? I echoed hesitantly. Yeah, she continued thoughtfully. Like what makes them work or not work. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I considered how much honesty to offer without revealing too much vulnerability. I think communication is key, I said carefully, and trust, but sometimes it can be complicated. Amelia nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward the water as if contemplating something deeper than just relationships in general. Complicated is definitely one word for it, she murmured softly. I wanted to reach out and touch her hand, to bridge that emotional gap, but hesitation held me back like an invisible barrier. What if she didn't feel what I felt? What if this connection was one sided? As if sensing my turmoil, Amelia turned to me suddenly, her expression earnest and searching. What about you? Have you ever been in love? The question hung between us like an unspoken challenge, a dare to delve deeper into our heart's truths. My breath caught in my throat as memories flooded back, moments of longing mixed with heartbreak from past relationships that had never quite fit right. I've loved before, I finally admitted quietly, feeling exposed under her gaze. But it always felt complicated. Complicated how? She pressed gently, but I hesitated again. Vulnerability felt like standing on the edge of an abyss, without knowing how deep it went. Just life gets in the way sometimes. I replied evasively. Amelia studied me intently for a moment before nodding slowly as if accepting my answer but not entirely satisfied with it either. We fell silent again. This time it felt heavier, charged with unspoken words lingering between us like an electric current waiting for release. As dusk began to settle around us and streetlights flickered on one by one above our heads, I realized how much time had passed without either of us noticing. It felt like we were suspended outside of reality altogether. I should probably get home, I said reluctantly after glancing at my watch. Yeah, Amelia replied softly, but didn't move immediately. Instead, she looked at me intently again, a spark igniting behind those beautiful brown eyes. I had such a great time today, she said finally. Me too, I replied sincerely as warmth spread through my chest at her words. As we stood up from the bench and prepared to part ways once more, the weight of unresolved tension still hanging between us, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something monumental was shifting within both of us. The week that followed our walk in the park was a blur of anticipation and anxiety. I found myself counting down the hours until I could see Amelia again, each passing moment filled with a mix of excitement and dread. The connection we had forged felt electric, yet the weight of my responsibilities loomed over me like a storm cloud, threatening to rain on this unexpected romance. When Friday finally arrived, I could barely focus at work. My mind kept drifting to our last conversation, the way her eyes had searched mine for answers, the unspoken words that lingered between us. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, teetering between desire and fear. That evening, we had planned to meet for dinner at a cozy restaurant downtown. As I prepared for our date, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my hair and trying on different outfits until I settled on a simple but elegant dress that hugged my curves just right. My heart raced as I applied a touch of makeup, wanting to look my best for Amelia. When I arrived at the restaurant, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, with soft lighting casting a golden glow over everything. I spotted Amelia immediately. She looked stunning in a fitted blouse and dark jeans that accentuated her figure. My breath caught in my throat as she turned to greet me with that radiant smile that made my heart skip a beat. Wow, you look amazing, she said, her eyes widening in genuine appreciation. Thanks. You too, I replied, feeling warmth spread through me at her compliment. We were seated at a small table tucked away in a corner, and as we perused the menu, The conversation flowed effortlessly. We shared stories about our week, her tales of school events and my work related stress, and laughed over shared experiences. But beneath the surface of our lighthearted banter was an undeniable tension that crackled between us like static electricity. As our meal progressed, I noticed how Amelia's gaze would linger on me longer than necessary, her eyes tracing the contours of my face, lingering on my lips as if contemplating something deeper. Each time our eyes met, it sent shivers down my spine and ignited a longing within me that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. After dinner, we decided to take a stroll along the Riverwalk. The night air was cool and refreshing, and the sound of water lapping against the shore created a soothing backdrop as we walked side by side. The city lights reflected off the water's surface like stars fallen from the sky. Can you believe how fast this week went? Amelia asked, glancing up at me with that familiar spark in her eyes. It feels like just yesterday we were at that cafe. I replied, my heart racing as I recalled how easily we had connected. I'm really glad we met, she said softly. It's been nice having someone to talk to. Her words sent warmth flooding through me. I feel the same way, I admitted, taking a deep breath as I prepared to step into deeper waters. You've made me feel seen. Amelia stopped walking and turned to face me fully. Her expression was serious, yet vulnerable. I've been thinking about what this is, she said slowly. My heart raced at her words. It felt like we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. What do you mean? I don't want to just be friends, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. There's something more here for me. The admission hung between us like a fragile thread, a delicate truth waiting to be unraveled. My pulse quickened as I searched her eyes for confirmation of what I hoped she meant. I feel it too, I finally admitted, my voice trembling with emotion. But it's complicated. Her gaze softened as she stepped closer. The warmth radiating from her body enveloped me like a comforting embrace. I know it is, she said gently, but sometimes you have to take risks. In that moment, everything around us faded away. The sounds of the city dimmed into silence as our worlds converged into this singular moment filled with possibility. My heart raced as she reached out tentatively, brushing her fingers against mine, a simple touch that sent sparks flying through my veins. Can I kiss you? Amelia asked softly, her voice laced with vulnerability and hoped. I nodded slowly, unable to find my voice as anticipation built between us like an impending storm. Her hand slid into mine as she leaned closer, and time seemed to stretch infinitely as our lips finally met. A gentle brush at first that ignited a fire within me. The kiss deepened quickly. It was both tender and passionate, a collision of emotions that left me breathless. Her lips were soft against mine, and every sensation intensified, the taste of her coffee lingering on her mouth mingling with the sweetness of something more profound blossoming between us. I felt myself melting into her embrace as everything else faded away. The world around us ceased to exist. It was just us lost in this moment of pure connection and longing fulfilled. But just as quickly as it began, reality crashed back in like an unwelcome tide pulling me under. A rush of guilt surged through me. Thoughts of my daughter and what this might mean flooded my mind. What if people found out? What would they think? As if sensing my internal struggle, Amelia pulled back slightly but kept her hands clasped around mine, her eyes searching mine for answers. Are you okay? She asked softly. Yes, I stammered, but inside I felt torn apart by conflicting emotions, joy mingled with fear and uncertainty. I just didn't want to cross any lines, she continued gently. I know how complicated things can get. I know, I replied quietly, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes from the weight of everything unspoken between us, the desires clashing with responsibilities, and yet here we were standing on this precipice together. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, caught in that moment where everything had changed, yet nothing was resolved. The kiss hung in the air between us like an unfulfilled promise, a tantalizing glimpse into what could be while leaving both of us yearning for more yet unsure how to navigate this new territory we had stumbled into together. And just like that, A single kiss had transformed everything while leaving us both dangling over an abyss filled with uncertainty. The days following that fateful kiss were a whirlwind of emotions, each one crashing over me like waves against a rocky shore. I replayed the moment in my mind constantly, the taste of Amelia's lips lingering long after we had parted. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. I felt exhilarated by the connection we had forged, but guilt gnawed at my insides like a relentless predator. Returning to my daily routine felt surreal. I went through the motions at work, attending meetings and answering emails, but my mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts of Amelia and the undeniable chemistry we shared. Each time my phone buzzed, my heart raced, hoping it would be her. But as the days turned into a week without any messages, that initial thrill began to morph into anxiety. I found myself avoiding social gatherings, fearing that someone might notice the change in me. My friends began to question my sudden withdrawal, but I brushed off their concerns with vague excuses. Just busy with work, I'd say, forcing a smile that never quite reached my eyes, but the truth was far more complicated. I was wrestling with feelings I had long buried. Feelings for another woman while still trying to navigate my role as a mother and a responsible adult. The weight of my choices pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. Point one evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling mindlessly through social media, my phone buzzed with a message from Amelia. Hey, hope you're doing well. Want to meet up this weekend? My heart soared at the thought of seeing her again, but it quickly plummeted as reality set in. Could I really go through with it? What if someone saw us together? What if my daughter found out? I hesitated before typing back. I'd love to, but maybe we should keep it low-key? Of course. Just as then, she replied almost instantly. The thought of being alone with her again sent shivers down my spine, both thrilling and terrifying. Yes, I typed back, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. As the weekend approached, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The moment I stepped into the cafe where we had first met, anticipation coursed through me like electricity. But as soon as I saw Amelia sitting there, her smile brightening the dimly lit room, that excitement was tempered by an overwhelming sense of guilt. Hey, she greeted me warmly, standing up to embrace me again. This time, it felt different, charged with unspoken tension and possibilities yet to be explored. Hi, I replied, trying to sound casual while feeling anything but. We settled into our seats and began talking about everything and nothing, books we loved, movies we wanted to see. But beneath our lighthearted conversation lay an undercurrent of unresolved feelings that made every laugh feel bittersweet. Have you thought about what happened last time? Amelia asked suddenly, her voice steady but her eyes searching mine. I felt my stomach drop at her question. It was as if she had pulled back a curtain on all the chaos swirling inside me. I have, I admitted slowly, but it's complicated. I know, she said softly, but I don't want to hide anymore. Her words struck me like lightning. They held both promise and danger. What do you mean? I mean, this connection we have is real, she continued, her voice steady yet vulnerable. And I don't want to pretend it doesn't exist. A lump formed in my throat as I considered her words, the truth behind them both exhilarating and terrifying. But what about everything else? My life, my responsibilities. I get that, she said gently, reaching across the table to take my hand in hers, a simple gesture that sent warmth flooding through me. But you deserve happiness, too. The sincerity in her eyes made me want to believe her, to believe that this could be something more than just a fleeting moment of passion. But fear clawed at me from within. What if pursuing this meant losing everything else? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my husband. Can we talk later? Important. My heart sank as panic surged through me. What could he possibly want? The last thing I needed was another confrontation about our strained marriage, a topic I had been avoiding for too long. I'm sorry. I need to take this, I said apologetically as I glanced at Amelia's concerned expression. Of course, she replied softly, but didn't let go of my hand immediately, her touch grounding yet electrifying all at once. I stepped outside to take the call, trying to steady my breathing as I dialed his number. Hey, he answered tersely on the other end. We need to talk about us. Is this about the kids? I asked cautiously. No, he replied sharply. It's about our marriage. My heart raced. This wasn't what I wanted right now, not when everything felt so fragile and uncertain already. I know things have been rough lately, he continued, but we can't keep avoiding it. I'm not avoiding anything. I shot back defensively, feeling frustration bubble up inside me. Yes, you are. You've been distant for weeks now. His voice softened slightly, but remained firm. What's going on? I hesitated for a moment before deciding how much to reveal. How much could I share without unraveling everything? Just work stuff. Work stuff, he echoed incredulously. You're not fooling anyone. I took a deep breath. This wasn't how I wanted this conversation to go. Not when there were so many other things left unsaid between us. Let's talk later tonight. I finally said, trying to buy myself some time while suppressing the rising tide of emotions threatening to spill over. Fine, he replied curtly before hanging up. As I returned inside the cafe, Amelia looked up expectantly, but there was something different in her gaze now, a flicker of concern mixed with uncertainty that mirrored my own internal turmoil. Everything okay? She asked gently. Yeah, just some family stuff, I said vaguely as I slid back into my seat. Her expression shifted slightly. It was clear she sensed the tension radiating off me like heat from an open flame. You can talk about it if you want. I shook my head slowly. Part of me wanted to confide in her, the part that craved connection and understanding, but another part screamed for self-preservation. I think maybe we should slow down, I said finally, feeling like every word was dragging against an invisible weight pressing down on my chest. Amelia's expression fell slightly. Disappointment flickered across her face before she masked it with a brave smile. If that's what you want. It is, I said quickly, but couldn't shake off the feeling that every word felt like a betrayal. Not just against her, but against myself too. We finished our coffee in silence after that, each sip tasting bittersweet as unspoken words hung between us like an unfulfilled promise waiting for resolution. As we walked outside together again under the fading light of day, the air thick with tension, I could feel something shifting between us, a fragile thread threatening to snap under pressure if we didn't find a way forward soon, and deep down inside me lay an unresolved conflict, a choice between two worlds colliding, one filled with responsibilities and expectations versus another pulsing with desire and possibility. The days that followed my conversation with Amelia were a blur of tension and introspection. I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, oscillating between longing for her and grappling with the reality of my life. Each moment felt heavy with unspoken words, and the weight of my choices pressed down on me like an anchor threatening to pull me under. After that fateful coffee date, I had avoided Amelia's messages, telling myself it was for the best. I needed to focus on my family, on the responsibilities that loomed over me like a dark cloud. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see her, her smile, the warmth of her hand in mine, the way she had looked at me as if I were the only person in the world. The memory of our kiss haunted me, igniting a fire within that refused to be extinguished. Then came the weekend when everything changed. My husband had finally confronted me about our marriage, and we had spent hours discussing our struggles, the distance that had grown between us like an insurmountable chasm. It was a difficult conversation filled with tears and truths that had long been buried. We both acknowledged our shortcomings and the fact that we had drifted apart over time. Yet, despite the heaviness of it all, there was a sense of relief in finally addressing the issues we had both been avoiding. But even as we spoke about rebuilding our relationship, my heart ached for Amelia. I realized then that I couldn't continue living in this state of denial. I had to confront my feelings head on and make a choice about what I truly wanted. That evening, after a long day filled with emotional turmoil, I found myself sitting on my bed staring at my phone. The screen lit up with messages from Amelia, each one a reminder of what I was trying to ignore. Finally, I took a deep breath and typed out a message. Can we talk? Her response came almost instantly. Yes. When and where? Tomorrow? Same cafe. Perfect. Can't wait. As I lay in bed that night, anxiety twisted in my stomach. What would I say? How could I explain everything without hurting her? But deep down, I knew this conversation was necessary. It was time to confront the truth. The next day arrived too quickly, and as I walked into the cafe, my heart raced with anticipation and dread. Amelia was already there, her face lighting up when she saw me. She stood up and greeted me with an embrace that felt both comforting and electrifying. "Hey, it's so good to see you," she said warmly. "Good to see you too," I replied, forcing a smile despite the turmoil brewing inside me. We settled into our usual corner table, and for a moment, we fell into easy conversation about our week, her stories about school mingling with my updates on family life. But beneath it all lay an undercurrent of tension as we both sensed that something important was about to be addressed. "Is everything okay?" Amelia asked suddenly, her expression shifting from lightheartedness to concerned. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since we last met." I began slowly. About everything. Her eyes widened slightly as she leaned in closer, her expression earnest. "What do you mean?" "I care about you," I admitted, feeling vulnerability wash over me like a wave. "But I also have responsibilities, my family, my marriage." Amelia's gaze dropped for a moment before she looked back at me. There was sadness etched across her features. "I understand," she said softly. "But where does that leave us?" "I don't want to hurt you," I replied earnestly. "But pretending this connection doesn't exist feels wrong." A silence enveloped us as we both grappled with the weight of those words, the implications hanging heavily between us like an unfulfilled promise. "I've never felt this way about anyone before," Amelia confessed quietly. "You make me feel alive." Her honesty struck me deeply. It resonated with everything I had been feeling but hadn't dared to voice until now. "I feel alive when I'm with you too," I admitted, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "But what does that mean?" she asked gently. "I think maybe it means we need to take some time apart," I suggested hesitantly, feeling tears spill over as the reality of what I was saying sank in. Amelia's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, a bittersweet acceptance reflected in her eyes. "You're right," she said softly. "We can't ignore reality. I want you to know how much you mean to me," I continued, feeling raw and exposed. "You've opened my eyes to so much more than just what's expected." We sat in silence for a moment, both grappling with the enormity of our feelings, the love that had blossomed between us, but also the reality that surrounded us like an impenetrable wall. "I'll always cherish what we shared," she said finally, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. I nodded through my tears. This wasn't how I wanted things to end, but perhaps it was necessary for both of us to find clarity amid the chaos. As we stood up to leave, Amelia reached out and took my hand one last time, a lingering touch filled with warmth and unspoken promises yet unfulfilled. "Take care of yourself," she said softly before stepping back, her gaze lingering on mine as if trying to etch this moment into memory forever. "You too," I replied hoarsely as we parted ways outside the cafe, a bittersweet goodbye hanging heavy in the air between us. Walking away felt like leaving a piece of myself behind, a part that would always belong to her, but also knowing it was time for me to rediscover who I was. Outside of this whirlwind romance, and the weeks that followed, life gradually returned to some semblance of normalcy. My husband and I worked on rebuilding our relationship while still navigating the complexities of parenthood together. But even amid those challenges, there remained an undeniable shift within me. I felt more empowered than ever before that I learned that love could be complicated but also transformative. It taught me about vulnerability and courage, the strength found in embracing one's true self even when faced with difficult choices. And while Amelia would always hold a special place in my heart, a reminder of passion and connection, I understood now that sometimes love means letting go for both people to grow.
Sometimes love means letting go for both people to grow into who they are meant to be. As seasons changed outside my window, flowers blooming anew, I felt hope stirring within me. Perhaps this chapter wasn't truly over after all, but merely an invitation for new beginnings, yet unexplored.